Hi, I'm Suzanne. I'm an alcoholic. I was trying to pause to make sure I had enough time to for your segue. Um, First of all, I know I talk a lot, but I will not be talking to the top of the hour. I know sometimes it gets away from us, but the first thing I want to say is for those of you who are not regulars at Sober Tribe, you're missing a good thing. Hopefully, you'll come back and check out the schedule to see what we do during the week and what Daphne and Brad have coordinated. And I'm so grateful. And I want to thank Daphne and Brad for always being here and those people who have hosted. You know, I just really appreciate it. I came across this meeting because of Jim. He told me about it. And when I came, it was just a different type of energy. It really was. And I loved it. And I immediately felt comfortable at home. Actually, the first meeting I came to, apparently, in New York, we log in like 20 minutes early. I had no idea about the 5 minutes before thing. And then, so apparently I was the first one in the room. I had no idea that that's how you did it. So I totally felt like I got sandbagged when I walked in the room. But I quickly, really love the energy here. And I'm so grateful that, to be part of this group. And quite honestly, you know, in New York, like we usually have a home group, but, I get to be on this meeting more than any group at all. So it's more like a home group to me because I get to see a core group of people quite regularly. And for me in my sobriety, that's important to me, because I am going to tell you a little bit about my story, but I today I don't live in the dark time or what got me to get to my seat because it really doesn't matter. I will talk about when I first was brought to AA 6 years ago by a friend of my brother's. I really was obviously not very spiritually fit. And I was brought to a meeting for those New York people who know me in Sheepshead Bay. And it was a very odd meeting. All I heard was God, God, God the entire meeting. And I was like, I thought you told me this wasn't about church and God. And it was, I wasn't really listening. So basically, when I left that meeting, I went right to Norris Park Bench, which I know every town has a Norris Park Bench where it's a really nice bar and some food. And, I wasn't willing, you know. So, I will just say that I grew up, for those of my friends that are here from home, I grew up in Marine Park. It's a very, working class neighborhood, Irish, Italian, cops, firemen, teachers. And I spent my summers in Breezy Point, Rockaway Beach. And it was typical. I used to think about it when I first came in and I would tell my story. I would tell you how hard I had it. I had come from a one parent home and my father didn't care about me. And you know what? All that is bullshit because I had a good life. I had a mom who really killed herself to give me everything. And although, my dad really, had his own agenda, I realized today that, being an adult most of the time and, married with children, they probably just did the best they could with what they knew and what they had at the time. And, when you're a child and, I liken that to my alcoholism, I was so selfish and self-centered. I could never even imagine that, maybe my mom and dad didn't have the best marriage and the choices that he made were what he needed to make for himself at the moment. And, now that I've come a little further in my life, I would like to thank them when I was 6. Sometimes I question that. So, I realize it, they were a young couple and, they did the best that they can. So I've learned when I reflect on, how when I first came in and I decided to really like try this program, like I had one toe in AA and one toe out the door because I wasn't sure that this could work for me. I was so full of self that I was sure that no matter how many people this worked for, this was never going to work for me. Never. Could you imagine? That's how full of myself I was. Plus, I couldn't imagine my life without alcohol. I just, I lived in a family where, it was Sunday and you had wine with dinner and, it was Tuesday and you had to go to a wake. And so across the street was the bar. So it was just everywhere. And I just couldn't imagine, living my life. And, I would say stupid things when I first came in, like, what about when my children get married? And, all the things that people say when they really are not really ready for sobriety. And so the long and short of it is I drank pretty typically, even though I would have told you that my drinking history was unique because it wasn't. It was really good until it wasn't. Basically, that was it. And when I say it wasn't, it meant, physically and mentally, it wore me down. I couldn't barely look at myself in the mirror. I had just gotten arrested for my second DWI, where I had to be basically removed from my car because I flipped the car. Like, it had gotten bad. People say, how bad can it get? And when you're in recovery, and when people come back after relapsing, oh, I've got it this time, and I always had it, and I know. And until finally someone in the room said, why don't you stop telling everybody you know and just shut your fucking mouth and listen? Stop talking. Do not share for 6 months unless someone asks you a direct question. It wasn't my sponsor at the time, I will say that. It was a man, but he was someone that, would constantly call me on my bullshit. And it's what I needed. And so I tried it. And, other than giving my day count, many meetings, it would be like, hi, my name is Suzanne. I have 68 days. And I'm just going to listen. Like, that's what it was for a while, because I actually listened to someone. And then, I got fired by my first sponsor. One of my other sponsors is in here now. It's just like, it was just so much going on that I just, I wasn't ready until, I went to one rehab, and I knew I was going to drink again, even when I left there, because the entire time I was there, I was busy critiquing about how dirty it was, how the gym wasn't good enough, how the food sucked. Like, I was concentrating on everything but my sobriety. And the second rehab I went to was gorgeous. It was Marworth in Pennsylvania, one of the best in the country. I got thrown out of there for talking to men, a gay man at that, but still a man, So, and I basically stood up and said I wasn't going to follow the rules. And like 15 minutes later, they're like, can you come in here? And they're like, well, you should just pack your bags. And I was like, what? I didn't know what was wrong. I didn't know how to follow a rule. Women in AA would tell me, it was suggested to me that, and as soon as I heard those words, suggestion, I don't have to do that. Just because someone suggested it to you doesn't mean it's going to work for me. Or I would figure a way to manipulate it to make it work for me. So, the long and short of it, I kind of got together with my current sponsor, Christine, and I'm so grateful, Christine, that you're here tonight. And I kind of identified, and I poured out a lot in the beginning to her, and I felt a connection with her. And, I had a lot of, I don't even like to use the word relapses, because I really started to believe that I could do this, but I still wasn't convinced that I couldn't drink safely. I had to really do some research, in the about 6 years that I've been working on this. I am going to say it in a positive way, like, from a woman who went to basically, drinking almost every day, in the 6 years of my sobriety, I drank, I can count on one hand how many times. Thank God I stopped for good, because I was about to go to another hand. But that's a big difference from drinking every day to day. But the problem is, what they always say, right? When you have a belly full of beer and a head full of AA, it's never going to work. And I realized how every time I drank, everything got worse. So no matter how I felt, when I wanted to numb those feelings, instead of stopping and saying to myself, oh, let me make a phone call, or even thinking it through, right? How am I going to feel tomorrow or the next day? I never did it, because I just wanted to be numb. I never liked feeling. Feeling was always a problem for me. I love when people say, and thank you, Daphne, for that beautiful introduction. I appreciate it. And, and I've met some people that always tell me, oh, you're so dynamic. I love listening to you speak, or she's a powerhouse, or, oh, you want to get things done, Paul Monty, right? But, a lot of that is just me, staying busy and putting a task in front of me and going full throttle, because then I don't have to worry or concentrate on the things that I have to really work on within me. I really, my daughters laugh at me, because like, it's not that I'm overly sensitive, but like, I cry at the most ridiculous things, but that's okay, because that's who I am. But I could never let someone know that that's who I really was. I had to be the toughest. I had to drink the biggest guy under the table, and I would do it a lot. I came close to killing myself with with alcohol many times, but I had to prove it. So I don't, I can tell you, I did go, AA has been a real blessing to me, but I did go to a counselor. I did go to a therapist couple. So I needed to go see a therapist, because there were some things in my past that traumatically that affected who I was as an individual, but also affected who I was as a woman. One of them having to do with my father, and another one to do with, and I don't really share this, but I will, because I know maybe someone needs to hear it. But, my mom was really strict, and there was one day that she actually went away on a church overnight thing. And so I told a few friends that my mom was away and they were coming over. And Marine Park, once one kid hears and the next kid hears, the next thing you know, there's cases and cases and cases of alcohol being coming in your house. And long story short, my brother, who was involved, that's another thing, don't fall off your chair, but my family's been involved with bars in one capacity or another. So drinking's kind of always been there. He came around the corner from the bar and was like, what is going on in here? And he basically threw everybody out. Of course, he took all the beer, I'm sure, now that I thought about it after the fact. And he left to go back to work around the corner. And he basically put me to bed because I was drunk. And he went back to work. But what he didn't realize is when he left, he never locked the door. So when I woke up, I was 17. I woke up to somebody being on top of me. And it kind of never, and actually I woke up to him being on top of me, not really understanding who it was. And then my brother basically busting my door down and pulling this person off of me. And, it kind of created a very different approach for me when it came to men, because prior to that, and the only reason I tell you that first is, I was always an athletic girl, and I know you're shocked, but I've never been shy. So when you added alcohol to this body with this personality, it was like, this on louder, more obnoxious, no filter. I know people think I really don't have a filter now, but you can imagine when alcohol's added. But what I noticed as soon as, when I was in about 6th grade, I started developing faster than most girls. And I had a bigger chest, bigger hips. I played sports, and all my guy friends would come watch me. I thought because they were interested in my athletic abilities, but it really wasn't that. And what I realized is I could manipulate men to buy me alcohol, to get me into clubs, to get me into concerts, not necessarily for sexual favor. They thought they were going to get something, but I could manipulate, and I could talk my way in and talk my way out of anything. And, I'll be honest with you, from being like that and having that kind of experience, no offense to any men in the room, like I really thought that I always would have something over on men, that I could, mentally, I felt like there's no man I'm going to meet that can challenge me, that I'm not going to be able to figure them out. I was so full of myself. And then when that incident happened, when I was in my own house, that, it became something very different for me, because this man was, he was an 18-year-old. I think I was 17. It was right before I turned 18. He was a year older than me. And, he was a big kid. He was like, I'm 5'2", for those of you who've never met me. So like when you meet me in person, and some people have over the weekend, like they usually say, wow, I never realized how little you are. And he was like 6'2", and he was a big guy. Played football, played rugby, and it affected me differently. Like I blame myself, had I not really manipulated him in the past, maybe he wouldn't have felt that he could do those things. Had I not had the party, there was a lot of those games going on in my head. And so basically that was a turning point for me when it came to men and when it came to alcohol. I was never going to allow a man to hurt me ever. But at the same moment, whenever I was in a relationship, I would always allow that man to be a reflection of how I felt about myself. If they thought I was too fat, then I had to go on a diet. If they thought that I wasn't being quiet enough, then I'd have to be more quiet. I allowed the opinions of others, especially the men in my life, to really affect, the way I saw myself, which obviously for many of us, it wasn't really always in a positive light, even though I had done a lot of positive things, in my life. I'm going to just tell you one last quick thing before I go into the solution of this mayhem, which doesn't seem like a lot of mayhem, but I'm not going to tell you all that really went on, because it really got pretty bad. When I was 20, when I made my way through college rather easily. I played softball in college, but I blew my ACL out, and so my softball career got sidelined. So I ended up doing what I only knew. I like bartended, and so school was never a problem for me. So although I graduated Stony Brook University like pretty well with my grades, I really became a really proficient drinker. And when I graduated and took my, what am I going to do? I actually became a teacher. And the summer before I was beginning my teaching career in Catholic school, good Catholic girl that I was, I went to Jamaica because I love reggae music, as many of you can see from my Instagram name, those of you who follow me. So I went to a reggae sunfest right before, like it was the summer, it was June. And because I graduated college, I was done. I was going to go for a week, and then I was going to come home and work the summer and then start teaching in September. Well, this is just to tell you the type of extreme I do, the type of addict I am, okay? I went to Jamaica, I met a guy, and I stayed for 2 months. I did not come home. I went for a week. I stayed for 2 months. I drank Red Stripe. I went to concerts. I was in Jamaica. I tried to get smoking pot. It just wasn't for me. It never made me feel right. It made me want to eat. And that was already a problem for me because I do everything extremes: food, sex, alcohol. Thank God I never did drugs because I definitely would be dead today, without a doubt for me. So I just wanted to kind of explain to you what my extremes were. And when I came home, Labor Day weekend, because I was starting work that Wednesday, I thought my mother was going to have a cardiac arrest. She kept calling me, when are you coming home, whatever. It was interesting. So, but that's like the cycle of my life. Like everything's extremes. So fast forward many years, my drinking was pretty typical. I drank weddings, whatever. And when I would start to have like little brownouts, I thought it was normal. Why? Because every other woman or guy I hung out with drank that way. I grew up in a community called Breezy Point, and what they call it Boozy Point, for those of you who might not know, the Irish Riviera. Everybody drank. And so I was surrounded by people who would never question my drinking. When I would lose my phone and lose my wallet and park the car and not know where it was. And it was just a nightmare until, I ended up ending a relationship, and that was in my late 20s. And by the time I was in my early 30s, I already knew, I had an inkling that I had a problem, but I wasn't addressing it. Neither was anybody that I was with. So basically, all my friends were already getting married and whatever. And I said, you know what, I really want kids. So, I really didn't have a lot of discerning thoughts in those moments. So I ended up, meeting my husband, which is what I love. I usually call my ex-husband Corey. I met him through a friend, and he lost both his parents when he was 17 in a fire. He was living in a house like he brushed his teeth in the same sink where he washed his dishes. It was a hot mess. So I was going to fix him. I was going to make his life better. And I was, he was smart, and he was funny, and he was sarcastic, and he was really, really smart. And I'm not going to lie to you, he had a lot of money. And I didn't grow up with a lot of money. And I just thought it was a win-win because, eventually he wanted kids, and so did I. And he was a little bit younger than me. And so, I basically, married him, and we had 2 beautiful daughters. And, and as my life moved forward and I was teaching, and the drinking kind of was good, right? We know that, right? I didn't drink during the day. Like I'd come home and I would open up a bottle of wine, and before I knew it, like the entire bottle was gone while I was cooking dinner, and I was looking to open another one. And I wasn't a pretty drinker. I wasn't like a little martini drinker or beautiful, like, some pretty pink drink. It didn't matter to me. I loved Jack Daniels. I never wanted anything mixed into it. I never understood, why are you mixing shit with your alcohol? Just drink it. But I loved beer. It didn't matter. I was terrible. I really was with my drinking. I was so undiscerning. And it just slowly progressed and got worse. And it got worse. And from the outside, people would always tell me, my God, you live in a beautiful house in Mill Basin. It's a bougie. Daphne would definitely have a house over there. You live in a beautiful house. You have 2 beautiful children. And honestly, all I'll say is this, when people are dysfunctional and they're not working on themselves, they usually pair themselves up with people who are the same way. So although the man that I was wasn't an alcoholic, he had his own stuff, and he was involved with a highly illegal business, which is why the money was so big. And that's a whole different story. And when I tell those stories, sometimes people tell me I should write a book. But we had a lot of money, and money was never an issue. So people would see, like, whenever people would need things, or, oh, we need to have this here, we'd always have it at my house. And a lot of stuff happened. 9/11 happened during that time. 9/11 happened. My brother was a New York City firefighter. We hadn't heard from him in like 24 hours. Thank God, he was down there. And, from people who came from my neighborhood, we lost, I stopped going to funerals and memorial services after the 61st one. I couldn't go to anymore. And then a month later, a plane crashes in Rockaway, and I lose more friends. Like it was one thing after another. And in that time frame, I always use this time frame, from when 9/11 happened, right, 2001, to when Sandy hit, which I lost my house. I lost everything. My husband and I, at the time, we were split up, and I had moved most of my stuff into my house in Breezy Point, and I was going to live there, and we were going to be separated, and we were going to go our separate ways. And of course, I was still drinking like an animal. But then Sandy came and took all of that too. And you know what? It gave me an excuse to drink. But it also gave me an excuse to help other people. I was cooking for people. I was doing laundry for people. My friend moved into my house in Brooklyn. It was just like, but that really was when my drinking became what it became. And for women, I learned later on, like, I was a woman in my 40s, and the chemistry and whatever it was, like the blackouts got worse, and things would happen and I'd have no recollection of it all. And I knew the alcohol was affecting me differently. And so that's basically when I knew, well, actually, I guess when I got arrested for driving my car with a DWI would be the first indicator that something, maybe I shouldn't be, drinking and driving. But you know what they say, your trapdoors have trapdoors, which have basements. And, each time I'd come back, I went into AA and I would be telling people I would be all in, but then I'd try to do a fourth and fifth step and I'd hold stuff back because I was too ashamed. And, there's this one lady in AA, her name is Mary. She's this little Irish lady. And she would say to me, listen, stop your bullshit. Stop your in and out. Just come in and stay. Tell a woman all your stuff, because you could be sure if you can write it down that somebody else did it. Just get it out, because there was a lot of blame and self-hatred on my part. And, I was working with Christine. I'll fast forward, I was working with Christine, about 2 years ago when I was taking my daughter, Emily, and my youngest daughter, Maggie, to Atlanta. And vacations were always a problem for me. I would see people drinking and I'd forget that, having a little cooler by the pool and everybody having 2 beers throughout a whole day. I don't drink like that. I drink the cooler till there's nothing. And then I'm looking for more. And then I'm drinking like the cheap open bar shit that's in my room when I go back. It's terrible. 5 beers in the shower while I'm getting ready for dinner. It's just, I'm that person. But when I went, and I had gone to California without drinking and I had done things, but when I went there and I was by the pool, my daughters were upstairs doing some nonsense on the computer. I just don't know why, but that alcohol looked, just tasty. It was 2 years ago. And I'm gonna tell you something else in a minute. But when I told Christine, when I came back crying and upset, and I said to her, please don't give up on me. And she says, I'm never gonna give up on you. The problem is you are giving up on you. And so basically, she said to me, she goes, I got to ask you a question. We know that you're a nightmare with the phone, that you don't ever call anybody to say, do you think this is a good idea? Or, hey, I just passed the Marriott bar for the 17th time and it's looking better and better each time. I don't do that ever. She goes, did you stop for a minute and replay the tape of what your life gets like after you drink? Or did you stop for a minute and say, God, please help me? And I didn't. I never did any of those things. And these were things that supposedly were in my toolkit as I was in AA. I didn't. So I realized that, I would talk the good talk, but I wasn't walking the walk. And I would tell people I was fine and I would tell people I got it, but I didn't. And so 2 years ago, and this, I want to tell you that the last couple of days have been challenging for me because in my memories of my phone, the memories of 2 years ago have been coming in my phone. And I knew what was coming because I mentioned this in the Sober Tribe meeting. When I drink, I go radio silent on social media. And people know when I drink because I'm not reachable and my social media goes dead. And so I was waiting for it this week. And I would see when, oh, we got to Atlanta. Oh, we had dinner out in Atlanta. And I literally drank the day before we came home. So I don't know what I was thinking was going to happen. But it was a little painful this week, and the biggest pain for me. And, I used to come in and cry all the time about my daughters. But the biggest pain would be that, not that I, disappointed them, but I know how much they lived in fear when I drank, because I used to drive my car. Granted, that did stop the last year that I was, before I really, really, did this, but still, why wouldn't they be afraid? So my daughters would be fearful. And I realized though that, what, I had to come back and do something different. And I'm going to say this, I've had a lot of traumatic things happen drinking, but this last time that I drank, although I could tell my daughters were twisted and pissed, I came home and I drank for one more day, but nothing uneventful happened except that I physically felt like I was going to die. Physically, how I felt drinking for 2 days was the absolute worst I had ever felt. And I'm sure I should have been in the hospital. I hadn't eaten. All I did was drink 24/7. When I went to the bathroom, not TMI, but what was going on. I was totally dehydrated. I felt like my insides were coming out. I went into work and I was totally detoxing. It was bad. And so I had said to Christine, I have to do something different and I have to get through my work. I never finished the 12 steps in my 6 years of coming in. And so, with a renewed focus and my mouth closed and my ears open, I came into AA for a last time. It's funny, when I came back, Christine and I went to a, like, I don't know, when I stopped talking, she could remind me. It was not like a roundup, but it was like a workshop. It was an all day thing. And a friend of ours, Irish Paul, he spoke, and, I was crying and I was miserable. And, a friend of Christine, a friend of ours from Rockaway, he came up to me and he's like, you were doing so well. And you're breaking my heart. And, everybody was rooting for me more than I was rooting for me. So I had to just make a decision that, I couldn't live like that anymore. Being numb wasn't going to solve my problems. I had to just deal with my feelings. I had to go through my feelings. I had to separate myself from certain men and certain situations that were codependent and not healthy for me. And I had to stop taking other people's inventory and blaming everyone else for what my shit. I really had to do it. And I had to stop being a superwoman dynamo trying to help everybody else, because that's what I was doing. I wasn't working on me because I was too busy helping everybody else. So, what changed for me, that's what it was like. And I kind of kept it PG. I will just say that there are many, many girlfriends and wives that are probably very happy that I'm sober today. There are probably many ex-boyfriends that are very happy that I either, changed my phone and don't have their phone numbers anymore. Because I always sought validation in other people and other things. I didn't realize that until I loved myself. And, I know it sounds very hallmarky, but until I loved myself and accepted myself, the quality of the people that I was going to allow in my life would always be subpar. Today it's funny because I have certain standards. Like, I speak about this often with women in recovery, like, and not just men. I don't allow any relationship in my life that doesn't meet a certain quota. And that's okay. If someone doesn't like it, well, that's all right, because you're not going to be around anyway, because I'm not going to be associating with you. But you don't have to like it. It's how I live my life. It's my truth. I killed myself to pay for myself to go to college. I have 2 master's degrees. I'm a teacher. I love my job. My students love me. I'm going to retire in 4 years. I own a house. Through all this, thank God I didn't lose it, because I definitely could have. I have 2 beautiful children who thrive and are so smart despite me. But, I'm really happy with who I am today. But when I first came into recovery, my mom, who I joke and say she's the queen of Al-Anon today, but she always tells me what everybody thinks of me is none of my business. But still, to a degree, I still care about what people think of me. But that's because I live in integrity. What I do, even when people are not looking, it's still important to me that the people that, people, friends in recovery, that they know that they can come to me if they need help. People that know that if they share something and they say to me, I want to share this to you in confidence, they could say, okay. If someone, I've learned that if somebody who I love in my life, has a financial challenge and I can give them the money, I give it without an expectation of having it back. I do things differently today. I would lend money to like boyfriends back then, and I would hold it over their heads. I would like hold them hostage, look what I did for you, I wasn't a nice person all the time. So when I made a commitment to Christine that we would do this different, and I would, move through my steps and take my steps in a concentrated way and really try to apply everything to my life. And even when the littlest of things would bother me, I would try to read, and I had to stop looking at things as suggestions. I had to really look at things as, if I really wanted to save my life, I had to do what I was told. And, she would say to me, she goes, listen, you're a grown woman. You really can do whatever it is you choose. But if you really want this and you want to work it, there are things that you really need to run by me. Like my brother works in a bar in Rockaway called the Bungalow Bar. She's like, I went on social media and you were out with all the teachers on the last day of school in the Bungalow Bar. She goes, listen, I don't mind that you go there because it's a restaurant, but that is not what was going on that day. She goes, you don't belong there. And early in sobriety, there are a lot of places you don't belong. And so this time around, I try to do things differently. And I went to Christine once and I said, Chris, there's a live reggae band and I really want to go. And she goes, you know what? All right, so we'll go. And she and I went to hear the live music of friends of mine, and we had a great time. And, I realized today that there's nothing I can't do in sobriety, but there's a lot of things I choose not to do without having somebody who's either aware of my recovery, whether it's someone who's not one of us, let's say, but they know that I'm sober. I got to be with someone, because sometimes my ideas aren't the best. And I'm not even talking about the alcohol, because, I'm an adrenaline junkie, and I'm a food junkie, and I'm definitely a guy junkie. And, there's a lot of different words that I can substitute in that first step. I am powerless over. It's like, as a teacher, it's like fill in the blank. At a different time, I'm powerless over the gym sometimes, and my life becomes unmanageable. I'm powerless over Emily, my oldest daughter. There's a lot of things, and I had to learn that and accept that about myself, that I have to work in a lot of areas. And sometimes I don't want to, and sometimes I don't like the reality of who I am or my behavior in something. But today, because I work in the steps and I try to be the best human being that I can be, I found a better balance. I'll definitely text Christine every day, but during the first year, I had to call her. We had to meet. Of course, we had to do those things, but I called other sober women in recovery. I tried to reach out to newcomers. I tried to reach out to people who had a lot of time. And, I realized something within me, within my recovery. And I only mention this because I'm going to tell you about the work today. Like, I've always had something missing in my life when it came to identifying with a father figure in my life. My dad really was never in my life. And I did find a couple of really wonderful older gentlemen in AA that would often speak to me in that father capacity, telling me how much I had to offer the world. And it really, in some key moments, it made a huge thing, because you know what? I'm a huge believer for people in sobrieties, and I'm considered new too, that, other than like doing service, men should be with the men and women should be with the women. Because I know that early in sobriety, you get a lot of shit confused. You get a lot of feelings confused. That's why I have a female sponsor for me. Whatever works for everybody else, wonderfully. But as far as, someone who has problems like me, because I try to help women like me, if you're, first of all, God help you if you're like me. But if you're like me, then you've got no business having a male sponsor. Hell no, you don't. Absolutely not. And you got no business dating. You could think you can have a casual relationship when you're new to sobriety, but it doesn't really go that well. So I've realized why those suggestions are in place, because, your brain is not really thinking all the best in the beginning. So other than checking in with my beautiful sponsor and working on my steps every day and trying to help others, my first year sobriety, my first year working toward that year, I had 11 months and 2 weeks once. Isn't that great? Before I finally got my year, because I had to make sure. The pandemic happens, so now it's March. People are dying. I have to come home. I'm the technology coordinator. I have to manage giving out hundreds of devices to children and students and teach this. It was just like a shit show. And then I threw myself into service on Zoom. And you know what? I was making and it's funny, Jimmy came in early, a friend said, thank you so much. I always thank you when I see you for turning me on to those meetings in Ireland. I'd be making a meeting in Ireland in the day. I've been making my Rockaway Beach meetings in the afternoons or the evenings. And then I'd be making another meeting at night, because I could go to meetings around the world. And you know what? I really felt spiritually grounded. And, I would be remiss that, what they say in AA, like, you shouldn't make any big changes, right? While you work on your first year of sobriety, right? Of course I listened, but I didn't really listen, right? Because I wouldn't be me if I listened to every rule exactly. But there were things already in play, right? So my husband of today and I were already not living apart, and we had a tumultuous relationship. And I will say this, I was a nickel in that dime. So today I know that I was a big part of the demise of that relationship. He doesn't feel the same, and that's his work to do or not to do. I cannot worry about that. But I know that there was a lot of toxicity that I brought to that relationship. I know it for a fact. But Christine and other women in AA helped me get through my divorce. And, I'll never forget, in my home group at the time, which was Marine Park, I shared that the day I got the letter in the mail that my divorce was finalized, I cried. I cried because I felt like such a failure, that it was something in my life that I swore I'd never do. And that was the reason why I try to hang on to that marriage. My children, they need to grow up in a home with a mother and a father. No, because when I left that house for the final time, he and I were in a knockdown, but not a knockdown. Trust me, I did knock them out once. But we were in a big brawl, and he was telling me what a terrible mother I was, which I have to say, and I don't need anybody to testify, but they would. I wasn't a terrible mother. I showed up at everything. My kids looked great. They were smart. But it was his thing. And he was screaming at me, you're a no, whatever words he was using. And my little one, Maggie, she was probably like 9 or 10 at the time. She came flying out of her room and she was like, enough already. She said, you, to my husband. Is she your mother? So I don't know why you keep telling her she's a bad mother. How are you to tell her she's a bad mother? I decide if she's a good mother or a bad mother. And then she turns to me and she goes, really? At this point, do you really care what he thinks? And then she walked right back in her room, closed the door. I was like, all right. So the next day, I packed all my shit up and I left. And the saddest thing was I left and I had to leave my girls there because I know that I had to go and get help. And I had to, I can't believe I still cry. I had to leave them to go get help because I knew that I couldn't stay in that relationship. Because I'll end with this, because the last time I came home from rehab back into that house, I was greeted with a bottle of vodka waiting for me on the counter. So I knew that that would never work for me, because he needed me to be weak and he needed me to fail. He never really wanted me to succeed. Even today, and and all that I have, like when he came over here one time for my children, like he's so angry still, and all I can do is pray. I can pray for him. And when I have to go over there into that house, I say, please, God, go in before me. Because if I go in without God, oh Lord, God, no, even with my spirituality today, I don't know. I got a really good uppercut today, so I don't know what might happen. So with the help of AA and, oh, this is what I was going to allude to. In the midst of all my nightmare, not with Christine, but I had met someone about 3.5 years ago. So, who kind of was involved with seeing me in my in and my out, but he's Buddhist, and he's been a Buddhist for 25 years, and he doesn't drink. He doesn't put any foreign bodies in, nothing foreign into his body, no drugs, no alcohol, nothing. And he really has a spiritual path that I have never experienced in my lifetime. I've been a product of that wonderful Catholic church, and my husband was I'm going to be nice. He's Jewish. I know more about his religion than him, but that's okay. So, I don't find God in church. When I walk to the beach, I feel God. When I go hiking, I feel God. My higher power is all around me. When I sit in meditation now, I feel God. Because the way I began, he taught me to meditate in a way in the beginning. I couldn't sit still for more than 2 minutes without my brain thinking about, oh, I got to get up, or I wonder if my booty looks good if he's behind me. Meanwhile, he was never even looking at me sitting on my meditation cushion, because that's how crazy I am. He taught me to fill my heart up with so much love, the love I feel for my children and my mother and my friends and the people who help me, and project it outward. And just the way he helped me in my spirituality has been such a gift for me. And, he did introduce me to certain Dharma talks and spirituality that, the Buddha talk. And I laugh now because I'm like, AA and a lot of these other religions, they ripped off Buddha, they ripped the Buddha off with a lot of these concepts, which were, a long time ago. And so between AA, my own surrender, because that's what it had to be at the end. I had to surrender. I had to stop fighting. There is not weakness in surrender. I was fighting and I was killing myself. So I had to admit that I couldn't do this by myself. In that first step of Alcoholics Anonymous, we admitted, we. And people would tell me all the time, you don't have to live like this anymore. And so I started to rely heavily on the we. And when things would bother me in a meeting, I would share it. And when I felt a certain kind of way, I would share it. And I keep referencing Christine. You're so famous this meeting, Christine. You're going to owe me something for this. Big up, Christine. She would tell me when I started becoming more spiritual fit, and I was be like, oh, I'm home and I worked out, and I think I'm going to clean out my closet today. She's like, how about you sit down and do nothing today? How about you have a problem with serenity? And she was right. I had a long time, had a problem. I could sit in meditation when I had a focused meditation, but I couldn't sit with myself sometimes. And I realized that in my early years of sobriety, I would try to fill that serenity up with people. We know which people, things, events. And I don't have to do that today. I love my home. I love my fit family, because this disease for me is absolutely mental. I say it all the time. This brain is like a dangerous neighborhood. You don't go in there alone. Definitely could be dangerous. My thought is usually a bad thought. My friend Denise, I don't know if she made it on here. I actually called her the other day and asked her something before I did it. Shocking. I'm sure she fell off her chair. But I have to work on my spirituality, my higher power. My physical well-being is a huge part of who I am today. I ate myself to 327 pounds because I wanted to lose who that woman was. And I don't want to do that today. I love who I am today. I love all my curves, and I love that I love a lot of things, but I have acceptance today that training, working out my body and my mind, and going to AA is what keeps me fit. It's what works for me. I need to do that. And so I'm blessed that I had that man in my life. He's still kind of lingering on the outskirts. I just, you know how that goes. I have my spirituality. I have AA. I have Refuge Recovery, which has helped me immensely. I have so many women in recovery that help me. And I have you guys, those of you who have been in my life, and those of you who even may be here for the first time, that you show up. I learned today that I can show up for other people today. I can do things for people. And I especially try to do things for people with no expectation of anything in return. That's the greatest joy for me today. And you know what? When I get in the head, when I get in here, I know I got to go do service in some way. When someone calls me and they're irritating me, I have to look at myself and say, why? What is it within you that's being reminded of that? Or what's triggering you? And I don't even like to use that word trigger. Why is that? And I have to work on me. And today I live a very different life. This is year 2 in a pandemic. I can count on one hand now how many in-person meetings I went to this year. I did get to go to, no, that's a lie. I went to a lot more on the beach, but I get to go to Zoom meetings, and it's beautiful because I don't think Zoom meetings are going to change. I think there will always be some sort of Zoom meeting in some capacity for people who are homebound. And I think that's beautiful. I'm going to end with this because it was a really major event in my life. I've always had people surround me and support me, especially when I didn't believe in myself. Especially now I have a lot of fit, sober friends. And my fit life and my sober life, it's kind of intertwined. And some of those friends are now friends because of me, sober and non-sober. And it's wonderful. But I will tell you this, that this June, I was actually training outdoors on a field, and I got a phone call from another friend that one of my closest friends who never, ever gave up to me. And he was a trainer. And what's funny? People used to think that we were a couple, and people would joke around all the time and say that, oh, I know you slept with him. And I'm like, actually, no. And he'd be like, if she slept with me, she would never be leaving me alone. There's no way. He's one of my closest friends, and he drowned this summer. He went up, I spoke to him on a Thursday, and he was dead on a Saturday. And, one of the most painful things I had to do was tell my children, because he's been in their lives for a long time. And, I post about him every now and again, because it's like, I know sometimes he gives me signals from heaven, like, stop being an asshole and go do that. Or why, I know he used to bust my balls all the time about burpees, and it was our joke. And, and our joke was, my husband swore that we were sleeping together. And it was just always our joke, and, I didn't believe you people when you told me that when things like that happen, you didn't need to drink. And I realized that drinking would not make that situation better, and when I got to go to his wake and hold his mother's hand and speak to his brother, and I said to him, I said to his brother, I held his hand and I said, I want to thank you for sharing your brother with me for the last 17 years. He was one of my best friends. And his brother looked at me and said, you know what? I want to thank you for always feeding my brother. He always used to bring me home leftovers, and we both could laugh in the most sad moment of my life, and I wear these bracelets for him and I don't take them off. And, he always would tell me, and I wear it on my wrist, and it says SE4E, and it says sacrifice everything for everything. And so I have to sacrifice everything for my sobriety if I want to have everything in my life today. And my friend would remind me that all the time. And you know what? I am worth it. And I love myself in a way today that, I set boundaries today. And the promises say that we get so many beautiful things in our lives, but sometimes we don't get them back because there's consequences to our actions. There's also consequences to setting boundaries and setting, people benefited from us drinking. People benefited from us allowing certain things. And they don't like it when we grow and we are more spiritually fit. And you know what? Whether they have a blood relationship with me or not, I don't allow that in my life today. And that's my personal choice. And I'm allowed to make choices like that today to protect myself. And I do that. And I just feel so blessed today because my life, I always say it, I have luxury problems today. I don't have major problems. I have luxury problems today. I really do. And I just am so blessed, and I feel so grateful today for so many of you who sent me messages, and I got to celebrate, I'll end with this. My mother used to always, my mom, she's so super God loving, and she's so, I don't know. I feel a little envious. I'm a little salty toward my mom every now and again because she's got such a big God. And she said to me, she would say it all the time. She goes, "Is it God or is it odd? Suzanne, you told me like you were having a hard time getting ready to do your fifth step with Christine. And you told me you walked into 2 meetings this week about your fifth step. Is that God or is it odd?" Well, needless to say, I stopped telling my mother about certain things because I was tired of hearing it. But when my daughters and I went upstate to adopt a rescue little pit bull, and we fell in love and we were getting ready to put him in the car, and I said, "Oh, by the way, when's his birthday?" And the adopting place said, "Oh, his birthday's May 1st." And so Sully's born on my sobriety date. And so I also believe that's God giving me a little God sign to be reminded that, I don't want that date to ever change. And I know it doesn't ever have to change. As long as I'm true to who I am today, I live in my authentic self. I make mistakes as long as I tell people and believe it and mean it. I mean what I say, but I don't have to say it mean today. And that also means about my own boundaries. And I am so blessed today to have you in my life. And I'm so honored. I will say this, Brad, Daphne kind of sandbagged me into speaking because I was getting her speakers. And then she goes, "Wait a minute, isn't that your sober date? I think you should speak." But I am definitely blessed and grateful to be here today because otherwise, I don't get to see you and share a little bit of my story. And thank you so much for helping me stay sober today. And I'm so glad that you're all here today. And I'm still Suzanne and I'm an alcoholic. Thank you so much. I'll mute myself, Brad.